all about trusting yourself, knowing that you know the voice of God.
All right. Good evening, TSSG family. Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to our Markup Monday for my UMI family. You can tell already that I'm on skates tonight. So we've got, there we are. Yeah, I just finished up a live for a conference that I'm attending. So good evening as you're coming in. Hopefully you have the ability to unmute yourselves and feel free to unmute yourself. This is our live format. So I'm excited, of course, to chime in here with you, and hopefully you've had a chance to read your lesson and to get started and be ready for this markup. So feel free to pop your cameras on if you want me to see your faces, but most of all, I do want to hear your voices. And anybody want to volunteer to pray? I know on this format of Markup Monday, I don't do everything by myself. So who wants to volunteer to pray while I grab a sip of water? Any volunteers?
Yes. Good evening, family. God bless your heart. Let us pray. Father, we give you thanks and praise for this day. We thank you because you love us with an everlasting love. We thank you for an opportunity to gather on this line, and we pray for our leader that you would continue to strengthen her heart, her mind, her body, her soul, her will, her emotions. And God, we thank you for an opportunity to sit at your feet, to learn of you. Lead and guide us this night, and forgive us of every sin and transgression, everything that we've said or done that has been displeasing or offensive to you and to your body. And thank you for the mega doors that you are continue to open for our leader. In Jesus' mighty name we pray, and thank you, Daddy. Amen.
Man, thank you so much for a beautiful prayer tonight. And I am, again, excited that you all are on. I know that our numbers will probably increase. I'm also learning kind of more about who's using which format. So yeah, last 2 weeks ago, and we'll do Markup Monday like this every 2 weeks, and we're going to go through a series of 2 lessons tonight. But I was shocked. There's a lot of international users. But first of all, let me just ask y'all, you're in the UMI series. I want to know how you're feeling. We're 3 weeks in so far. Just tell me how things are going. First of all, tell me if you're a teacher or a student. And the question that I have is, how are things going? And how are you enjoying the lessons? How are you exploring it? How are you all sorting through it or bringing everything to life in your class? How's that working out for you? And anybody can share. In your actual classes, how is that all working out?
Well, I'm not a teacher,
okay,
but good evening. I sit in the women's class when I'm not subbing. So, but I've been enjoying the class. I do a lot of, home study, just to stay in the word, but I've been enjoying it.
Awesome.
And it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of keeping up.
It's a lot of reading. It is. And I told y'all I teach young adults, so it's a lot. And finding ways to make it connect with them. That's going to be that's my internal challenge. So I'm with you on that. I wasn't in Sunday school yesterday because I ministered at another church, and they started at 10 o'clock, and we start Sunday school at 9:30. So I couldn't do both as much as I wanted to. But I heard the women's class had like a game. And they did it like the pyramid, the $100,000 pyramid, where one person had to describe something and the other had to guess what it was. They had to describe it without using the words. And I heard they didn't even want to get out of Sunday school. And I was like, listen, I'm going to step up my game, no pun intended. But I heard they had a great time. So I was excited to hear that. So I love hearing stories like that and how people are finding ways. Because to cover a whole book in 1 week is a lot. But I think there are definitely some fun ways to make it happen. So I'm settling in. I can definitely say that I'm definitely settling in. So we're going to cover tonight Numbers and Deuteronomy. I have my packet. One packet is printed and one is not. I'm not quite 2 weeks ahead like I should be, but I got mine ready for that. Look at me. I had colors and everything. And then my other one, I actually did it on the computer while I was on the plane. So you'll see me looking up at my computer when we get to the second lesson. But we're going to follow our normal Markup Monday format. So we're going to take a look at each book. Let me go back to my page 1 to look at just the title. And they didn't give us creative titles for the next 2 lessons. The titles are Numbers and Deuteronomy. So there's not much for us to reflect on in terms of the actual title itself. But let's start with Numbers. What types of, do you have any thoughts about the book of Numbers? And I'm going to ask a combined question. If I were in court, I know I can't ask 2 questions at one time, but I do want to know if you have any thoughts about the book of Numbers, and or what do you want to know background wise? Again, what are those big ideas that you'll be pulling out about the book of Numbers? Of course, I always want to know who my author is. We're still in the first 5 books of the Bible, so I know that I need to be able to categorize that with the type of book that it is. I always look for like the major themes. You know what? I will normally find anywhere from 5 to 7 major themes that are developed inside of it. And sometimes I'll look at what references am I using. I do have my commentary, but that's not my only reference. I'm a Logos user, so I'll usually find a commentary that is designed for that particular book of the Bible, and I'm looking for that kind of information. So I'm going to be looking for major themes. You know, why is this book written? And largely, like, what, since this is still Old Testament, what parts of the story is this going to cover for me with the children of Israel? So that's kind of where my head is with what I want to know. Anybody else need anything different from a background perspective? Anybody else need anything different? And we do have our lesson already prepared for this one. We're just having a little technical difficulty getting the video downloaded. So I think our teacher is going to resend that to me, but the lesson is ready as we look at Numbers. So that's what I'll be looking at. Our major aims for change are that we're going to examine the Israelites grumbling about life in the wilderness. We're going to recognize that grumbling reflects an ungrateful heart and give thanks for the blessing of God in our lives. We'll be looking at Numbers chapter 11, verses 1 through 6, and then we'll look at verses 10 through 15. 10 through 15. All right. Let's see here.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So is people grumble? Is that not the title? Is that just something is written?
And I like that title. When I looked at my commentary, maybe I was moving too fast and I left the commentary in my bedroom. Is it people grumble? Thank you for that.
Yes,
I was looking too fast. I just saw Numbers. Thank you for a title. What's the Deuteronomy title?
The Deuteronomy title, unfortunately, I had to, well, whatever, sell a customer my paper book, so I'm on Kindle. So
okay,
I have to flip all the way over to.
Anybody have their commentary?
Title is
my bedroom. I'm sorry.
The Heart of the Law.
Thank you.
Okay, so The Heart of the Law.
All right, so let me just confess, when they put the title up there big, I looked there first. I didn't look underneath, so I have to be better about that, and I will be. All right, so people grumble. Yep, that's what they do.
People grumble. Yes,
let's go there. All right, let me get a volunteer thank you so much for that. A volunteer to read Numbers chapter 11, verses 1 through 6, and somebody who will read verses 10 through 15. In any version is fine. Any volunteer? 1 through 6.
Numbers 11, 1 through 6 in the KJV.
Okay.
And when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, and the Lord heard it, and his anger was kindled. And the fire of the Lord burnt among them, and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord, the fire was quenched. Then he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a lusting. And the children of Israel also wept again, and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all besides this manna before our eyes.
Thank you. Verses 10 through 15.
I'll read them.
Thank you.
Then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly. Moses was also displeased. And Moses said unto the Lord, Wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant? And wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me? Have I conceived all this people? Have I begotten them, that thou shouldest say unto me, Carry them in thy bosom, as a nursing father beareth the suckling child, unto the land which thou swarest unto the fathers? When should I have flesh to give unto all these people? For they weep unto me, saying, Give us flesh, that we may eat. I am not able to bear all this people alone, because it is too heavy for me. And if thou dost deal with me, kill me, I pray thee, out of hand, if I have found favor in thy sight, and let me not see my wretchedness.
Thank you. This is our reading for this week. So let's get ready. We're going to go through a typical fashion. What do you see? What do you think about? What do you feel? What does it remind you of? What do you want to know more about? I ran out of room on my paper, writing all along the margins again, because I love the children of Israel. They just, in the words of
Just
one of my
like us.
Caribbean friends, yes, just like us, Reverend Bernice, and they just carry on at such a high rate. They just do. They do. Let's do our small chunks. So I'll go verses 1 through 3. I'll read 4 through 6, and then we'll skip to I will do 10 and 11, and I'll walk us through it. So 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. And when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, and the Lord heard it, and his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burnt among them, and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord, the fire was quenched, and he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them. I'm ready. What do you see? What do you think about? What do you feel? Remind you of? What do you want to know more about? And you can just start at verse 1. What did you grab out of here? We're just doing an observation of this text. Remember, there are no wrong answers. It's just what you see. First thing I did was circle the word "and." So inside of these stories where we are in the because we're looking at the total book, I want to know where this story is situated, although I will likely just jump right in here because I think this is going to focus us on certain principles. But I just want to know, where are we in the story? Where are we in their movement? They are clearly moving between Egypt and the Promised Land, but what is happening in this particular case? So that was one of the first things I circled. I said this "and" means that we're continuing in a story. All right. What else do you see?
I think to where you said they're continuing in the
People
story
complaining and God's displeasure with complaining.
Okay, that was Sister Carolyn. I heard somebody else talking. Who was that?
that was actually me,
Hi,
Lisa.
Sister.
I think not only the people complaining, but it made me think when you're talking about the "and" that you kind of get to the middle of things and your enthusiasm wanes, and it sounds like they're hitting that point where it's, like we've been promised this, but this is taking longer than what we expected. That's the sense that I got from the people.
Oh, I love that, because yep, it was cool when we got delivered out of Egypt. Like we thought we were going to be moving on. This was going to be something. And now we are here, and yep, this is taking a little bit longer than I thought. So I love that, because I keep encouraging people to see yourself in the story. And I would imagine moving with a group this large. And I had to go back and look up that number because at some point in this passage, it just talks about the number of people, but it doesn't tell me how many. So I actually kind of Googled, what are we talking about? And we're talking, hundreds of thousands of people that are moving now with the group. And when I sit myself in this story, I'll be honest with you, I don't move with a whole lot of groups. I don't. I'm bad. I guess I got single female syndrome. So I know that's my Western mentality being applied to the story, but I know how, like a couple of weeks ago, we had our women's retreat at the church, and I think there were 27 or 28 women that went on the retreat. It was beautiful. I love Broken Bow, Oklahoma, but on the first night, dinner wasn't quite ready when they thought it would be ready. Now, fact, we drove. Keep that in mind. We drove. So dinner wasn't quite ready at 6:30, no problem. But at 7:30, what do you think I did? And I just told you we drove. What did I do at 7:30? Got in the car, went into the city, and found myself some salmon. And I know that I disappointed the leader in making that choice because I don't move well with the group. I couldn't wait that much longer. So I guess I didn't grumble or complain. I just fixed my situation. So I can only imagine, like, with individuals as they start moving, that, yeah, this does become a lot. And that's what the text tells us. In fact, I underlined the word when, because I wrote it this way. It seems like when you move in a group this large, it was just a matter of time. It was just a matter of time before somebody was not satisfied with something. We see the people, and I know that because we've been studying, we know who the people are, but if you're teaching, you want to be able to identify who are these people. And then I think it was Sister Carolyn that points out that these people, I call them the collective, they began to complain. We see the word complain there, but did anybody, what's your definition of complain?
Wish we were back in Egypt.
They wish they were back. So complaining, I just said they're not satisfied. For whatever reason, they are raising some level of dissatisfaction. As I observe the text, I see a group of people that seem to not be satisfied. So they are complaining, and typically we can complain about a lot of things. Let me see what you're saying, then I'll chime in. Who are their complaints against? As I read the text, it seems like the complaints are at least being, they feel like they blame Moses for a whole lot of stuff to me. It always feels like they're blaming the leader. Like, look where you got us out here. And at least when we were back there, we had this, we had that. So it seems to be for me that their complaints are toward the leader. However, even though their complaints seem to be directed one way, I'm still in verse 1. That's not the person who responds to the complaints. Who is the respondent to the complaints in verse 1?
The Lord.
The Lord. Yeah, the Lord. The Lord hears their complaints. We see that in verse 1. But what is his reaction when he hears them complaining?
He's angry.
Yeah, he's angry. He's absolutely angry. And my observation was that God is aware, like he's aware that they're complaining. And the fact that he is displeased with it gives me, I just said it's his reaction. I don't think it fell the way they were expecting it to fall. Like, I don't even know what they wanted there. Like, what do you want the outcomes of complaining to be? I was talking with one of my young adults who's a college student, and I asked last week, I said, is everything bad on campus? Is there anything good on campus? Because you're a junior, and if you spend the next 2 years complaining about everything and you never learn to see the good, it's going to be a long 2 years. So I guess that's what I was thinking as I read this passage here. So any other observations? I have some others, but what other observations do you make in verses 1 through 3? So we've got up to the point that the Lord is displeased. We've only made it that far. We're still in verse 1a. He's heard it and he's displeased. What other observations do you have? What do you see, think, feel, remind you of? What do you want to know more about? Any curious questions?
I did have one other thing in verse 1, actually in the New Living Translation.
Okay.
It starts out with soon the people began to complain.
Okay.
As opposed to where King James says and. So when you say soon, you look at
Sunday school lessons in Zoom.
Sister Carolyn, go ahead, finish that.
Okay, I was just saying that when you see that soon, and then we were talking about all of the things that are going on along this journey. You saying so many people and so many other things going on, but it was like eventually it was going to happen. So
Yep.
soon they just got to that point. We can't take this anymore. We're
Yep.
complaining. We got to get this out there.
For sure. Sister Sharon, you were going to say something?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I wasn't muted, and I was telling my husband I was doing 2 weeks of Sunday school lessons.
Oh,
I
okay.
apologize.
No problem. No problem. Okay.
But I did like Sister Carolyn's observation, because I saw the same thing. To me, the soon the people began to complain means it doesn't take us long.
It's just a matter of time before we find something. And it's always, oh, this is not in the text, but this is how this makes me feel. It's always the people who don't have to come up with the plan that are criticizing whether they like how the plan is going. My daddy used to say, you're either part of the problem or you're a part of the solution. But typically the people who are not a part of the solution are the ones who sit back and criticize the solution that's being delivered. So that's just how that made me feel. Like my heart went out to Moses sitting in this text. Like if I sit myself in the place of the leader, and as we read through this text, I just go, oh my goodness, like this is a lot. You're responsible for moving all these people. And the last thing you need is this group to hear what they're not satisfied about. You already know you're trying to do your best. You already know it's a big deal. You already know what you lack. And you already know how dependent you are on God. And yet when you give and you give, and yet your best is not enough for people, that's a hard space for a leader. So in a lot of this passage, I'm going to be honest, my heart goes out to Moses. So we're complaining, the Lord is displeased. What is the response of the Lord being displeased? What do you see next?
He moves to anger.
He gets big mad. God gets big mad in here. His anger, King James says, was kindled. And that made me think about a fire getting started up, that it was just enough friction to start a fire. So my next question was, it references the fire of the Lord. I said, what is this? For me, it seems like a really terrible level of punishment. And the fire of the Lord, there are two things that I see about the fire of the Lord, that it burned among them and it consumed. The two words that I underlined or wrote down were burned and consumed as the description of the fire. And when I see the word consumed, that is a word for me that means to burn up in its totality. So I kind of want to sort through, like, what does that mean? Consume those that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. I want to kind of dig into and parse into that. What does that mean? Anybody else? Anything in verses 1 and 2? We're still on verses 1. Oh, we're still in verse 1. Anything else in verse 1? I'm sorry, that was just verse 1. Oh, that was verse 1. All right, so let's go to verse 2. The Lord's anger is kindled. What happens in verse 2? I refer to verse 2 as a response to the Lord's anger. It's a response. And I have to be honest, I don't want to just tell the story. Like I actually went back and wrote this in my margin. Another fire experience, because I think it was in last week's lesson where we looked at it was the Exodus lesson where we looked at the giving of the 10 Commandments and how they continue to have these experiences with God that involve this Mount Sinai and the fire and the smoke and all that kind of thing. So for me, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's another experience with God and fire. Like these poor people, they don't seem to understand that they're dealing with this level, that God at this level. And so the people seeing God in this way again, or the response of God, this seems to strike some level of fear in them, just like we saw back in Exodus. That's what it reminded me of, that the people cry out to Moses for help. Anybody have any thoughts on that? My thought was, why Moses is always the fixer? Y'all do what y'all want to do. Y'all say what y'all want to say. You slick in your mouth until you see fire again. And as soon as you see these big displays of God, then it's all about Moses all over again. Moses, you go up there and you talk to him. You talk to him because if he talks to us, we might die. He'll talk nicely to you. Here we go once again. He's always like Olivia Pope to them. He's always the fixer. So verse 2b, Moses prays unto the Lord. And when he prays, I said that Moses seems to pray prayers that work. Moses seems to pray prayers that work. One of my questions is, why do the people choose Moses when they get in trouble? And I also don't get this in the text, but I am wondering, what kind of prayer did Moses pray to settle down the anger of God? What do you say when God is that angry? Because it tells me that his prayer was effective and that the fire was quenched. So Moses prays a prayer that works. Anybody else, anything in verses 1 and 2?
Sister Waynell, when you were talking, for me, it's the irony between 1 and 2, the irony of you're complaining about Moses and you're complaining about the hardship of your circumstance, and you go straight when God's response, immediate response, is the anger and the fire. You go straight to Moses, I need you to redeem me. It's the irony of I'm angry at him, the people, from straight to now that I'm on fire, I need Moses.
Yeah. I'm angry, but now I need you. Yeah. It's such a baby, please turn for me. Like, please fix it, Moses. There is, I wrote that down, the irony in that whole thing. Thank you for that so much, Sister Sharon. I didn't really say anything about verse 3 because normally I would find a place. I may want to find where Tabera is on the map, like modern day location, but because it gave me the name of it, what I did think about is like the significance of naming like these really transformational or marked moments in your life, right? Because right now, I don't think these people will ever forget. It's kind of like last Monday, right? I woke up to a text from my friend Beverly, and she says, it's September 11th, thinking of you today, love you always. Why? Because we were together on September 11th when the Twin Towers were hit. She was here visiting her sister and we were having breakfast. Well, you'll never forget where you were on a certain day when certain things happen. And so I think that is the value of like marking places and these memorable things. And the name, I think we look at how we name certain things. He chooses a name because this is where the fire of the Lord burned among them. But let's keep going here. Let's go to verses 4 through 6. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting. And the children of Israel also wept again and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish, which we did eat in Egypt freely, and the cucumbers, and the melons, and the leeks, and the onions, and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away, and there is nothing at all besides this manna. All right, what you got for me? What you got?
I still just like.
Go ahead, just Karen.
Now I still just like the New Living Translation, the foreign rabble.
Yeah, R-A-B-B-L-E, rabble.
With the Israelites. So I just want to, of course, I don't teach or anything. I'm just personally studying at this particular lesson, but that has really got my attention about the mixed multitude. And so some of the other people, who were these other people? Who were these foreigners?
That's exactly what I wrote down. I saw the word rabble too when I read it. The mixed multitude. And I just said that they seem to be identified differently from the people that we saw earlier in verse 1. They were simply called the people. Now this group is the mixed multitude. So who are these people? How did they get with the Israelites as they were moving to the promised land? How did they connect with them? So those are my questions. I love it. Thank you. Anybody else? Anything in 4 through 6? What do you see? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I still see a lot of the complaining for what they want, but what I don't see is any action among them to help the process to get what it is. You know what I mean? You're continuing to look for somebody to supply it to you, not what you can actually do to get it. You know, like such a pet. I know they're being let out, but it seems incredibly passive to me still.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess I'm with you on that. And I also feel like it lacks gratitude because all they're telling me here is what I don't have. But what they're not saying is you got me out here hungry. It's kind of like it's what my mama used to say. It may not be what you want to eat, but there's food in that refrigerator. And she would ultimately say, you're going to work it out. You'll either go to bed hungry or you'll eat what I have. And so when I read this, I agree that there is a passiveness, but there's also like this lack of gratitude, like as if in a sense, yes, still trying to blame Moses, but whomever you want to choose as your target, acting as if they had nothing at all. And so this like attempt to compare what we had then versus what we have now, like it even lacks reality. You look where you are, like you're in the middle of nowhere and we're moving and we don't even have all that. So it just, I don't know. It's just, it makes me think about why people complain and what in general, if I pull this lesson, pull the principle out of this lesson, in general, what are people generally complaining about? And it is that thing where I'm with Sister Lisa, where there is no responsibility. It's just this attempt to passively put everything on you and make you responsible for whatever my fantasy may be. I was also taken, I don't know what the new NIV says, Sister Carolyn, but the King James says a lusting. And that was a term that made me kind of laugh a little bit because King James kind of tickles me sometimes. But that word, I wrote that word down and I redefined it as craving. And so I wanted to kind of think about what are those things that, like, this is a distraction to me, like where they should be so focused at moving forward. The one thing that we're getting tripped up on now is the food that you used to love. So what are those things that capture our attention and cause us to crave them in a way that we have a difficult time moving forward, or that we lack gratitude? So that was kind of what I was thinking there. What else?
NLT does say crave.
Okay.
And my other thought on that is this a bad influence, this mix, this group of people? Because it says they fell a lusting. Yeah. And the children of Israel also wept again. So were they being influenced by these people?
Oh, I like that. I wrote down influencers. Thank you. And the children of Israel joined in.
And they should not have been looking back.
Oh,
right,
yeah.
right.
Love that, Sister Burns. Yep, should not have been looking back. And isn't it interesting how looking back sometimes like can cause you to feel dissatisfied? And I think that that's like even true even in like life today. Sometimes you can look back and wish that a certain thing or pining over a certain thing, realizing that like Egypt, it wasn't good when you were in it. It was, you were slaves. Yeah. Like y'all are playing with me. Yeah, okay, you ate some garlics and you ate some leeks and you ate some fish, but you were also making bricks out of straw. I mean, you forgot that part, right? Okay. All right, I'm not recording tonight, so
every night they were providing everything and they still was looking back.
And since we've agreed that our sessions will stay recorded in private, this is why we have face-to-face and we can stay private. I think about it sometimes even in relationships, especially with women, right? You ask, how do they keep going back into a thing? Well, because at least I had, but he was beating your brains out.
Exactly.
But he wasn't faithful. I mean, like, no. So it's the same kind of thing that when we start looking back at certain things and we only see like the flowery things about it, that you kind of forget this was not good. It wasn't good. All right.
Israel was enslaved, so they probably didn't eat all of that the mixed multitude did.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we've noted that they were reflecting on foods they used to eat. We've noted that they are dissatisfied. I wrote down dissatisfied with their current provision. And I want to explore that a little bit more about what it means to be dissatisfied with your current provision. I asked, why do they miss the food? Why do they crave it? And what are they currently eating that made everything else seem so good? Like, it was what you were having now so bad. And I think that was my only question that I had, my only curious question. Anybody else? I'm going to move to verse 10. 10 and 11, then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly. Moses also was displeased, and Moses said unto the Lord, wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant, and wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me? All right, what you got in 10 and 11?
this almost sounds like the leader's lament, because
Mm.
Moses is in between a, proverbial rock and a hard place. God, I'm trusting you. I want to lead these folks, but every time I do, all I hear is what I'm not doing right. So what would you have me do with it? And I think that can often be a feeling that we have when we step up to take on a role, and it seems like it is not only underappreciated, but almost even scorned.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, I was writing down a lot, but then
Wow.
somebody else keep talking so I could write. Underappreciated and scorned. Oh, God. All right.
And
Anybody else?
in a place of complaining himself.
Okay. He's in a place of complaining himself. Anybody else with any thoughts? Sister Burns says it feels like he's complaining.
I think I'm getting lost in the rest of Moses' story and how he didn't, because we know that part, and he didn't go into the promised land because of these same rebellious and complaining people. He got angry, he got out of his character and all that stuff, and it just makes me start feeling some kind of way about Moses and his plight. Like maybe not a sympathy, but I don't know. I'm emotional thinking about all that he went through with them.
And
he still didn't make it.
Nope, he did
And
not.
They didn't make it because of their complaining, but their complaining pushed him to
It pushed him to a place of frustration.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we already know that frustration can breed anger also.
I agree. And I looked at just how frustration, like in 10 through 15, I agree with Sister Lisa with this like lament of the leader. This almost pushed him over the edge. Mm-hmm. And it made me think about like leaders serve in different spaces, and even us as leaders, when you serve in different places, like what are those things that even when you're trying your hardest, you're trying your best, that just push you over the edge? And in this case, we're looking at verse 10. Moses heard, I underline Moses, action is he heard. The people were doing what? Weeping, they're crying. He hears, it's not, I've heard complaining. Now, as I go from tent to tent, all I hear is crying. Ain't nobody happy. And that's literally his experience right now. And let's see, I asked the question, why are they crying? Apparently their crying is so loud that it can be heard from their doorways. And we're not even necessarily given the cause. And I know we'll read and bridge all this information, but in the raw text, we're not exactly given the cause. So we have to figure out why. But clearly the reason is widespread. And that's what I wrote down. It's like one thing when you got one person who's unhappy, but when you got a widespread issue and the whole camp is upset, that feels heavy for me. So I agree that my heart, like man, it goes out heavy for this leader. And not only that, but there's even more in verse 10. There's an and there. That's the people. Then he still got to balance the Lord in this equation too. So the anger of the Lord is kindled greatly again. And I was like, okay, again. Now I said, what's triggered God now? What's displeased the Lord now? Why is his anger kindled greatly now? And Moses was also displeased. So everybody's out of sorts here. The people are crying. The Lord's anger is kindled. Moses is displeased. Like this seems to be like just the perfect storm for me. Anybody else? Verse 11 tells us action. We see action here, that Moses speaks to the Lord. And I put again, and that is because he seems to have this access, this relationship where he is able to get to God. And I think that's a pretty powerful thing when we live in a space, or anyone lives in a space, that you have and can get to God, and you can have that conversation. And I noticed that his conversation is in the form of what? This conversation, it's all questions. It's all questions. It's all questions. Let's look at what these questions are. What's he asking God?
It kind of boils down to why me?
Yeah.
Like, why did you put me in the middle of all of this? Like, I've done what you've asked, and I'm getting, stoned, and people are crying around me, and What did I do to make, like,
Yeah.
why did you sign me up for this again?
Yeah, first of all, I'm your servant.
Yeah.
I'm your agent. Now thy servant. I'm your servant. And you got me out here
Well,
bad.
my
Have I
father-
done something wrong? I don't have favor in your sight now? And you put all this on me. And how heavy again that must feel. He does not seem to have a shared sense of responsibility. All this feels like you have put this all, you laid a burden of all these people on me. So it seems that he feels heavy. One of the questions I ask here, and you can tell me what your thoughts are, is his conversation is in the form of questions. So I ask, what is it to question God versus to ask God questions? Because a lot of times people say, well, you shouldn't question God, but what is the difference in questioning God and asking God questions? And do you think that either is okay? That's one of those think about it questions for me. Let's go ahead because this still gets good. There's still more questions. Let's keep on with the questions. Have I conceived all these people? Have I begotten them that thou shouldest say unto me, carry them in thy bosom as a nursing father beareth a suckling child unto the land which thou swearest to thy fathers? Whence should I have flesh to give unto all these people? For they weep unto me, saying, give us flesh that we may eat. So what are all these questions? Because he just keeps hammering with questions.
His frustration is coming out.
Yes, his frustration is out. And the word I wrote down is responsibility. Because he seems to be saying, you giving me the responsibility of all these people. Questions, are they my people? Because you told the people they was your people. You out here making covenant with them. You my people, I'm your God. Now you got me out here and they seem to be my people. But I thought they was your people. Did I conceive these people? I never called them my people. They're your people. I didn't give birth to these people. And I said, for me, the feeling, and I've mentioned this, is that it makes me literally think about the weight of leadership during tough times. And I think about those of you all who are pastoral leaders. Like during the pandemic, I feel like I saw the best and the worst in leadership in a heavy time. What it felt like to be concerned for people and to carry people and to know. And so I thought about that. And I wrote down these words because they kind of stand out for me in verse 12. The two words that stand out, well, that I thought about carrying, because he asked about carrying the children and providing for them as a suckling child. So carrying and caring are the two words are at issue. Are these mine to carry and are they mine to care for? That seems to be what he's asking. So it says for me, it feels tough for Moses, like he's carrying the weight of all these people, that he does indeed care for these people, but he feels very heavy. I asked why the term or the question of conceiving these people, and I wrote down the weight of responsibility, because he even asked, how am I supposed to get meat so we can eat? And that's when I asked how many people is he caring for, and that's when I went to looking up the hundreds of thousands of people that he's literally caring for and having to carry. Anything else in 11 and 12 and 13? 14, I am not able to bear all this people alone, because it is too heavy for me. And if thou deal thus with me, kill me, I pray thee, out of hand, if I have found favor in thy sight, and let me not see my wretchedness. 14 and 15 are, oh my goodness, this is when my heart was kind of breaking on this one. What do you all see in 14 and 15?
It's almost like he's at the point of despair, wanting to give up. Like, I don't see my way clear to anything. And since I don't see it, can you just take me out of my misery?
Yep. I wrote down the breaking point, Sister Lisa. This is the breaking point, because his focus seems to be on his personal ability to handle it, to lead, to make decisions, to be responsible for. And I said that he essentially says, and he does this, this is too heavy. He acknowledges it's a big responsibility and this weight of leadership is too heavy. And Sister Lisa, this is the first time I wrote this down, and it kind of says what you said earlier. I reflected on what it means to feel unsupported.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to feel incredibly like, you got me out here, these your people, and if this is how you're going to treat me and I'm your servant, then just kill me. If this is all there is to life at this point and you got me out here bad, then just go ahead and kill me. And so the question that I ask is, what makes death seem like a better option? And that's all I really had. That's all I had in this one. Anybody else on anything 14 and 15? All right, that's my numbers. Let's switch us out and we'll go to Deuteronomy. We'll go to Deuteronomy and we're going to get Deuteronomy done here. I do have to reference my computer notes on Deuteronomy, so let me get those up here and ready to go. All right, I am ready. We're reading Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 12 through 22. We'll skip down 16, verses 18 through 20. Anybody volunteer to read the passage in Deuteronomy for us in its entirety?
Deuteronomy 10, starting at verse 12.
Yes.
And now, Israel, what doth the Lord thy God require of thee, but to fear the Lord thy God, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul, to keep the commandments of the Lord and his statutes, which I command thee this day for thy good. Behold, the heaven and the heaven of heavens is the Lord thy God, the earth also with all that therein is. Only the Lord had a delight in thy fathers to love them and to choose their seed after them, even you above all people, as it is this day. Circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart, and be no more stiff-necked. For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, a great God, a mighty, and a terrible, which regardeth not persons, nor taketh reward. He doth execute the judgment of the fatherless and widow, and loveth the stranger, in giving him food and raiment. Love ye therefore the stranger, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. Thou shalt fear the Lord thy God, him shalt thou serve, and to him shalt thou cleave, and swear by his name. He is thy praise, and he is thy God, that hath done for thee these great and terrible things, which thine eyes have seen. Thy fathers went down into Egypt with 70 persons, and now the Lord thy God hath made thee as the stars of heaven for multitude. Chapter 16, verse 18. Judges and officers shalt thou make thee in all thy gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, throughout thy tribes, and they shall judge the people with just judgment. Thou shalt not wrest judgment. Thou shalt not respect persons, neither take a gift, for a gift doth blind the eyes of the wise, and pervert the words of the righteous. That which is altogether just shalt thou follow, that thou mayest live and inherit the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thus ends the reading of God's word.
Thank you so much, Sister Victoria, for God's word being read. We are looking at the observation in the book of Deuteronomy, and somebody will have to give me what the lesson. Oh, it's the heart of the law. You already gave me the heart of the law. What will you want to know in your background of the book of Deuteronomy? What are you going to raise? We'll be in the 5th book of the Bible, so that's the end of our first 5 books. Hopefully you're going to figure out who your writer is. We had a consistent writer for the first 5 books. But what is the purpose? What are we chronicling? What are the major themes that we're going to see as we're in Deuteronomy? And I know you'll pick most of that up in our very substantive daily readings. Let's go, because we got a lot to parse through here, but we're going to get it done. We'll do the same format. What do you see, think, feel? What does it remind you of? What do you want to know more about? We'll chop up kind of in 2 verses at a time. So let's do 12 and 13. And now, Israel, what doth the Lord God require of thee, but to fear the Lord thy God, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul, to keep the commandments of the Lord thy God and his statutes, which I command thee this day for thy good. All right, what do you see? Let's go.
He seems to be more mature or settled in his faith. He sounds more confident.
I like that. Anybody else, what do you see? First thing I underlined was not just the word and. I put brackets around and now, because that felt like a transition phrase for me. So I want to know what are, like, this Deuteronomy. So where are we going? And I wrote this down, like, what is this transition and where are we now in their story? This is also written in second person. So it addresses the Israelites and it's telling them what is expected. So I put brackets around your God requires. And that kind of draws my attention. And I just kind of stay focused on this idea that they were going from being an enslaved people into a land of promise. And like God all along has been like trying to condition them in their minds for how they were supposed to behave. Just like our lesson, I'm doing so many lessons at a time, and I preached twice this weekend. So if I can't stay straight on stories right now, pray for me. I've been in California and in Texas. I preached twice this weekend, in addition to the 2 Sunday school lessons. So, but when God moves them into place, he's trying to tell them that there are just ways. That was Leviticus. There are just ways that his people are supposed to behave. So to me, it's just, did y'all ever get those reminders when you were leaving home? Like sometimes you get rehearsed in the car. Now, when we get in the store, what are the rules? I'm not supposed to walk away from you. Okay, and what else? I'm not supposed to put my hands on anything. And what else? I'm not supposed to ask you to buy anything. You see how you know the rules before you even get in. So that's kind of how I feel like the rules seem to be rehearsed again and again. And you're also dealing with lots of death and birth that's happened as they're moving these many years through this experience. So keep in mind the time frame that's happened, how they're moving, the generations of people that are moving, and why this kind of instruction is necessary, because essentially that's the type of what we have here. That if I were to label this as a type of writing, this is instruction, and the instruction, the bracket that I put is what God is going to require of you. And you may have seen me pull out my green pen because I got all of my colored pens here tonight because I get to have a good time with this. And I literally was numbering the things that God requires. How many things do you see in here that God requires? Let's go ahead and call them out. What does God require? What's the first thing?
Fear him.
Fear him. Second thing?
That we love thy God, the Lord, thy God.
That's actually the third thing. What's the second?
Walk in all his ways.
Yep. The second is to walk in his ways. The third one was to love him. Number 4.
Serve him.
Serve him. And the fifth thing?
To keep his commandments.
Right. The fifth thing was to obey. Right. So we'll look at all those action words in there: fear, walk, love, serve, obey. These are the big things, the big idea that God wants from his people as they go into the new land. So why think about each one of those commands, remembering that God doesn't just give us commands for no reason, right? So why would those things be important to God's people as they were moved into this new place? And one of my questions is, or what I wanted to look at as I'm studying is like, what is this focus on obedience? Because that's a thing that we see again and again, that God is requiring this level of obedience. And I'm always drawn back to the covenants that he makes with his people. Like that is the number one thing that they were to give back to him. You can't pay God, but you can be obedient. So we give back in obedience. Reverend Nelson, I see your hand went up.
Yes, ma'am. And one of the things, just like you said, speaking of that, and now that seems like he's reached the conclusion of a matter, and now this is what the Lord requires of you, and he sets the standard, and he's not ashamed to be able to put the Lord's name stamped on it. And I think that is something very valuable that we cannot, just kind of like overlook. We may just, because of just reading it, but he establishes the authority with God. Like, this is what the Lord, this is what your Lord, this ain't coming from me. This ain't coming from Big Mama and them down the road. This ain't coming from how I heard things used to be, but this is what the Lord requires of you. And he comes with these things, and that it just establishes a whole nother sense of accountability. I think I've even shared that story before. You know, go outside, tell the kids to come in, and nobody move. You go outside and you say, "Mama said," everybody
Mhm.
jumps and moves. You know, so that sense of where that authority comes, it sets that standard of what is approved. It can make a difference.
Mhm.
I love it. Anybody else? All right, let's keep moving. That's what I see. It's a question. There's a question. And I always look at the form of things. And again, I think, this writer could have easily said, this could have been an imperative. The Lord says this. But I think anytime you see a question, it's inviting the hearer into a space of consideration with what am I supposed to do with this information, or how am I to connect myself into that space of responsibility. All right. Even though when you read these 5 things, what do these, as my young people say, it's kind of giving what? It's giving. I see y'all don't hang out with the young adults. These 5 things, it's giving 10 commandments.
Okay.
It's kind of giving 10 commandments. There's just 5 of them, but if you look at the spirit of them, it's giving 10 commandments. All right, even though it does not specifically list them. So again, what are the significance of this transition? I'm looking at my questions. Why does God emphasize fearing him and all these things, walking in his ways? Okay, I'm sorry. I think that's it. Also, I guess I just want to know, again, these books, this is one of those times when the way we're studying this is interesting, and at least right now what's happening is somewhat chronological. But is there anything that has provoked the need for this particular reminder? What is making this necessary right now? And if I already know this, I've been told this before, why is this coming up again in Deuteronomy? I guess that's what I wanted to know. All right, 14:15, behold, the heaven and the heaven of heavens is the Lord's thy God, the earth also, and all the heaven therein is. Only the Lord had a delight in thy fathers to love them, and he chose their seed after them, even you above all people, as it is this day. All right, what you got? 14:15. Behold for me means what? Stop, look, pay attention. And I noticed that the passage mentions the heavens and the earth and everything in it. I'm going back to my young people. That's kind of giving. It's giving creation story. It's giving creation story and describing that everything inside of the earth actually does belong to God. I see this interesting emphasis on their ancestry, on the fathers, and not just the fathers, but the love that God had even for their fathers. And that, how did I relate to that? I don't know your individual backgrounds, but when you think about your family, your ancestors, generations before you, do you consider their connection to faith and how God loved them? Let's see, this is UMI, so I don't have my Team Kojic family in here, but I did share it on my Facebook page. On the Kojic book this quarter, on the junior book, is my brother and my nephew. And they don't ask permission for these photos. These are just photos that were taken in convention settings or whatever. So when they're published, it's always a surprise as to who's on the cover. And I literally was like, oh my goodness, these are the days that I wish that my grandfather and my great-grandfather, who were both pastors, could see. My brother is a pastor, and there he is with his 17-year-old son, praying for him. So I think about like that kind of generational and ancestral love and connection to faith. When he talks about the love that God even had for their fathers, and it focuses on their special love. And inside of that, for me, kind of becomes this signal or indication that there's something special about you, that you're chosen because you are the descendants of these people. And in some way sort of shows me that there is this kind of divine love that he has for you in the same ways that he had it for your fathers. So any other thoughts? I'm curious about why there's an emphasis on love for the fathers. I'm curious about that. And I'm curious as to why do you get this reminder of love right after you get the reinforcement of the responsibility of what it means to be God's people. Then right behind that, you get this statement about love and how his love has always been present. I don't want to miss anything that you're thinking. Anything else so far in verses 12 through 15?
I think to your point about like why you got the reminder after you got the instruction is, I think for some people, they're so wrapped up in the I have to do and I have to perform that they forget the why behind it, and that there is a loving God behind the direction that's being given. And I could see how the direction could be intimidating if you don't place it in the fact that he chose you for such a time as this, and that's the reason behind it, to buoy you to continue to do it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I was thinking when you said about their fathers, because most of them have already passed away. They're ready to cross into the promised land. And you, like you said, like your brother and your uncles, those are the fond memories that you remember from your fathers and stuff once they've, passed on.
Love it. Thank you for that. Anybody else? All right, let's go 16 through 19. Circumcise, therefore, the foreskin of your heart, and be no more stiff-necked. For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, a great God, a mighty and terrible, which regardeth not persons, nor taketh reward. He doth execute judgment of the fatherless and widow, and loveth the stranger, in giving him food and raiment. Love ye therefore the stranger, as ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. All right, let's go. Because surely y'all got something to say on this one. It's so much repetition in here. We've seen some of this before. What are you thinking in 16 through 19?
They hadn't been practicing circumcision while they were in the wilderness.
That is true. But specifically here, there's another transition. So, and that's not a transition word, I'm sorry. There's a conclusion word here. What's the conclusion word in verse 16?
Therefore.
Therefore. As a result of all of that, as a result of this love that God has for you and the love that he's had for your fathers, therefore, there's something you need to do. You need to take an action, and that action is to circumcise the foreskin of your heart. And they would have been familiar with the acts of circumcision, right? But here, this is God specifically giving them instruction that this is not even just about natural circumcision. That's not what this is. But this is about, and I actually did underline the heart, like he does care about the condition of our heart, right? So, and I laughed a little when I read it because he could sure call these people stiff-necked.
Yeah.
That was the condition, that they would just get set in their ways and do what they wanted to do. And all of this circumcision of the heart is really about change. He's saying, this is how you are, and I don't really want you to be this way. You shouldn't be this way. And here's what it's going to require. So this, for me, is really a statement about change. And the word for is verse 17. There's a reason that this needs to happen, because this is about God. And he is the great God. He's the big God of all little gods, G's, the capital L, Lord of all lords. Look at these words: great, mighty, terrible, and he regardeth not person nor take reward. And that's very King Jamesy. Sister Carolyn, what does the NIV say in verse 17?
Now I'm looking at the New Living.
Okay, NLT, sorry.
In verse
17. Mm-hmm.
The Lord your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords. He is the great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality and takes no bribes.
See, there you are. No partiality, and you can't buy him.
Mm-hmm.
And when you find out what God is not, that probably tells you that somewhere in their history, they're used to dealing with people who are.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a nice way of saying he's not one of your little friends. He's not one of your little friends who's going to change his mind, who you can buy him off. That's not who he is. And when you see all of these, again, capital G, capital L, and then look at the adjectives that are used to describe him, this is literally positioning God for who he is. And remember when we were looking at the lesson in Deuteronomy, when they got the 10 commandments, there was a portion of our reading that really talked about God being at the center of it all. The fact that he wasn't going to share placement with anybody. So that's why I said there feels like so much repetition, because this is about placement of where God is. He's not here. He's not one of your peers. You can't make deals in the back room. He's going to always be here. And he does not show partiality, favoritism. He doesn't take bribes. He does execute judgment of the fatherless. In other words, he does look out for these people. He does care about, and when I see these groups, the fatherless, the widow, the stranger, we've seen these people before. Yet just yesterday, we studied about even preserving a portion of the field, right? So that they would have something that they could eat, kind of giving, that's giving what? It's giving Esther. Or no, I'm sorry, it's giving Ruth. It's giving Ruth, it's giving Boaz, it's giving field and gleaning, right? So that we do know that he cares about marginalized groups. So that's what I actually wrote down there, that marginalized groups do matter. Therefore, again, as a conclusion, as a result of that, verse 19, there's a conclusion word. You have a job, and your imperative there is love. You are to love the stranger. And then the reason, the word for is tells you why you are to love a stranger. Why? Because you were strangers once in the land of Egypt. And that just always takes me back to sometimes people move and they forget. They forget. Anything else? I wanted to know why circumcision was mentioned. What does it symbolize in the passage? I asked what it meant to be stiff-necked. We went through that. How does God's love for strangers help Israel connect to the idea that they were once strangers? And again, is there anything that's happened in their history that is requiring them to get these instructions? Anything that I missed for anybody else? Okay, then my stapler not getting along. 20 through 22. Thou shalt fear the Lord thy God, him shalt thou serve, and him shalt thou cleave, and swear by his name. He is thy praise, and he is thy God, that hath done these great and terrible things which thine eyes have seen. Thy fathers went down into Egypt with 70 persons, and now the Lord hath made thee as the stars of heaven for multitude. All right, let's go in 20 through 22. What do you see? This is just an observation. I don't need you to explain it per se. What do you see, think about, feel, remind you of? We have just a few to go. Y'all give me just about 8 more minutes of your good energy, and we're going to be through this passage. What is this telling you? There's an imperative here. Thou is King Jamesy for you. Shall is King Jamesy for will. This is not a survey. When you see shout, that's a you will do it word. That's not how you feel about fearing the Lord. Do you think it's a good idea if you no, you will fear the Lord. You will, what's the next one? There's a lot of you wills in here. You will do what else?
Worship.
There's a serve, that's worship. So you're going to fear the Lord. You're going to serve or worship. What's the next one? Cleave.
And swear by his name.
Absolutely. These are the things that you will do. These are instructions. These are not surveys, that they are to fear the Lord. And again, this is about the importance for me of like walking with God, serving him, because again, they are on their way into a place where they're going to have a whole lot of options. This kind of part of the passage reminds me again of when you go off to school. There's some things you will do when you get to school. There's some things you're not going to do when you get to school. And why is that? Because when you leave home, you represent whose household? Whatever household you came out of, right? So this is, think about it in that sort of way. These are the things that you will do. He is your praise. What does that say in the NIV, Sister Carolyn? What's verse 21 in the NIV?
The one who is worthy of your praise. He is your God, the one who is worthy of your praise. The one who has done mighty miracles that you yourselves have seen.
That's just that other way of saying, because that's who you represent. That's who you represent. You are his. And people gonna know who you are when you go in. I know I've been talking about my brother, but as a little kid, he was walking around our jurisdictional headquarters once we were in a state meeting, and one of those old preachers stopped him. He must have been 7 or 8 years old. They looked at him and he said, "You's a Henson." Because no matter where you go, you got a mark on you that somebody knows who you belong to. And so here in this passage, the children of Israel are being told, you belong to God. He is your praise. He's your God, and he's done these great things for you. Verse 22 is interesting. It talks again about their history, right? What does this tell them about their history? That their fathers went where?
Egypt.
And when they went into Egypt, when they went into slavery, how many of them were there?
70.
And now it's how many? You need to look it up, don't you? Hundreds
Multitude.
of thousands of y'all out of 70 people. So he is literally arguing how great God is and this amazing ability to multiply them. Remember, that was one thing that marked them in Egypt. That's one thing that drove the Pharaoh nuts. These people, they won't quit multiplying. Let me go kill these baby boys because that's the only way they're going to stop doing what they do. They like rabbits. They just keep multiplying. Oh my gosh. All right. So we know that from the historical text. All right. 16, 18 through 20. This is our last part. Judges and officers shall make thee in all thy gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, throughout thy tribes, and they shall judge the people with just judgment. Thou shalt not wrestle judgment. Thou shalt not respect persons, neither take a gift. For a gift doth blind the eyes of the wise and pervert the words of the righteous. That which is altogether just shalt thou follow, that thou mayest live and inherit the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. All right. We've seen something similar to that before. What in general is this talking about? When you see judges and officers, what do they execute? What is their job?
Justice.
Justice. These are the leaders of the judicial system. So this is instructions to this is instructions for the judicial system. They're going to need a system. Everybody needs a system of justice. I don't care if you got brothers and sisters in the house, you need somebody who settles disputes and mediates and figures out how we're going to work things out so we don't tear things up. So they needed a system of justice, of mediation. So this passage tells us about judges and officers. So what is the difference? This is establishment for me of a legal and governing structure is what I called it, that they would be appointed in each one of the cities and all thy gates. You need to figure out how many gates we're talking about, which the Lord thy God giveth thee in all and throughout thy tribes. And they're going to have a job. Their job is going to be to do what? Judge the people, not just any kind of way. Verse 18 tells us with what kind of judgment? Just judgment. So if there's just judgment, that means that there's a such thing as injustice. So as you're looking at titles and or themes that come out of scripture, this is talking about ways that we should be mindful of and be prepared to deal with injustice. This is where we get texts that help us focus, even when we're looking in our own communities. When we choose to stand up against injustice, it is because our job is to judge justly, that they wrestle not in their judgment, that they don't wrestle with whether they should judge a thing fairly, is what I saw here, that they will not have respect of person, that they won't take gifts or bribes, that their eyes will, because what do bribes do? This is what the text tells us. What do bribes do?
Lean you to the one that's giving you the money.
Right. It's going to lean you to a way that's unfair. It causes your eyes to be open to one person and closed to the other based on the bribe that you've been given. So not taking gifts or bribes and not perverting the words, meaning to taint the testimony of one who has given truthful testimony. That which is altogether just, meaning righteous ways, the righteous ways of God. That is the way that God's people are to live, and they're going to inherit the land which the Lord their God giveth thee. So what are the roles of these people? Why is it significant to administer righteous judgment? What does it mean to pervert justice? What does it mean to show partiality? These are my curiosity questions. I already asked you, how does accepting a bribe or not accepting a bribe affect the system, and again, any kind of historic implications that there may be with respect to righteous judgment. And that is Markup Monday for 2 lessons.
I just want to say, even today, you see mostly a lot of Jewish people are lawyers, judges, and stuff like that. That's their profession.
Yes, ma'am. So true. All right. So this is
now, before we do head off, just one thing that can you all hear me good? I'm back on my Bluetooth.
Go ahead.
Okay. Just thinking about that bribery and things. I've heard from people that work in the military that like you can only raise up so high in your rankings and get certain clearances if you have debt, and accepting these different briberies and things. It came parallel with something like that, because if you are in debt, or if you are not showing good stewardship of those things financially, it makes you a risk threat. And so you wouldn't have certain clearances, because someone could come in and say, hey, you know that 500,000 you owe? If you just tell us a little bit about the information we'll wipe that out for you. And so it just really speaks of a quality of integrity that these leaders were to have in these leadership positions.
Thank you. I'm writing down the word integrity. And yes, I know that's true in the military. And to be honest, it's also true when you sit for the bar exam as an attorney. They do want to know, they want to look into your credit history. Who do you owe? They even ask you, have you settled credit card debt before? Because that speaks to how they assess you and what they believe you to be. So true. Well, thank you to my UMI friends for being present on Markup Monday. I'm going to take 2 minutes, get myself shifted here, and I'll be right back for the ISSL. UMI friends, if anybody needs the kid pack, that should be up on tomorrow afternoon. And I will do my best to have the teaching template up by tomorrow as well. I love you all. Thank you for being present. And I'll see you back here in 2 minutes.